You know, after all these years, you'd think I'd have seen every possible variation of human behavior, every way we find to hurt each other and, more importantly, to hurt ourselves. But every now and then a story walks through my door that isn't about the noise, the yelling, or the dramatic accusations. It's about the silence. It's about the cold, methodical, and utterly convinced righteousness of one person's mission. Revenge is a powerful motivator. It can feel like justice, like empowerment, like the only logical response to being profoundly wronged. But I've always said it's a poison you drink yourself hoping the other person will die. And I've never seen that more clearly than the day I met Sarah. When my producers first briefed me on her case, the file read like a Hollywood thriller. The labels were already there: the scheming ex-wife, the vengeful woman, the stalker. Her ex-husband Tom was petitioning for a restraining order, claiming she was systematically trying to destroy his life. He had a binder full of evidence, screenshots of fake social media profiles, printouts of emails sent to his new boss, even a complaint from his new girlfriend about her tires being slashed. On paper, Sarah looked like a monster, a classic case of a woman scorned who had gone off the deep end. My team was prepared for a fireworks show, a screaming match on stage where I'd have to play referee. But when I sat down to watch her pre-interview tapes, I didn't see a monster. That's the first mistake people make. They look for the monster. What I saw was a woman who was eerily calm. She wasn't yelling or crying. She spoke with a level of precision and justification that was frankly chilling. Every action she took, from reporting Tom to the IRS for questionable deductions from 5 years prior to anonymously tipping off his new girlfriend's ex-husband about their relationship, was laid out like a legal argument. In her mind, this wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning, it was justice. Tom had cheated on her after 15 years of marriage, shattering the life she had meticulously built. In her narrative, he was the villain who had gotten away with it, and she was simply balancing the scales. I remember turning to one of my producers and saying, she genuinely believes she's the hero of this story. And that's infinitely more dangerous than someone who is just lashing out in a fit of rage. Rage burns out, but this cold, calculated sense of purpose, that's a fire that can consume everything and everyone, starting with the person holding the match. The central problem wasn't just her actions, it was her absolute unshakable conviction. She had built a fortress of justification around herself, and every brick was laid with the mortar of her pain. My job wasn't just to get her to stop the behavior. That's the easy part. My real job was to find a way inside that fortress and show her that the person she was keeping prisoner was herself. Before she ever set foot on my stage, I had my research team dig deep. You don't get to this point overnight. This kind of behavior has a history, a source. I needed to understand the before. Who was Sarah before she became this self-appointed agent of justice? The picture that emerged was one of profound dependency, but not in a way that you would notice from the outside. She was the perfect wife, the one who gave up her own career aspirations to support Tom's, the one who ran the household like a CEO, managed the kids' schedules down to the minute, and hosted flawless dinner parties where everyone remarked on what a perfect team they were. Her entire identity, her sense of self-worth, was interwoven with her role as Tom's wife and mother of his children. It wasn't just a part of her life, it was the whole thing. She described their early years to my producers with a wistful, almost cinematic quality. They were high school sweethearts. He was the football captain. She was the salutatorian. It was the all-American dream. And she clung to that narrative with a white-knuckled grip. I saw the pattern immediately. When your entire sense of self is externally defined by your husband, your family, your perfect home, you are incredibly vulnerable. Because if that external source is removed, what's left? Not just a broken heart, but a complete and total void. When Tom had his affair, he didn't just break their vows. In Sarah's mind, he erased her. He had taken 15 years of her life, of her sacrifice and investment, and declared it worthless. The pain of that betrayal is unimaginable for someone whose identity is so completely fused with their partner. It's a psychological amputation. So what do you do with that phantom limb, that ghost of a life? For Sarah, the rage was a replacement. The revenge became a new purpose, a new career. It gave her a reason to get up in the morning. It gave her a sense of power in a situation where she had been rendered completely powerless. Every successful scheme, every bit of misery she could inflict on Tom was a small hit of validation. It was a way of screaming to the world and to herself, I am still here, I still matter, and I can still affect you. The payoff wasn't just seeing him suffer, the payoff was feeling real again. This wasn't just about a broken marriage, this was about a woman fighting for her own psychological existence in the only way she knew how. And it was destroying her from the inside out. The escalation didn't happen overnight. It never does. It started with what she considered small, justifiable acts of annoyance. She'd signed Tom's new email address up for hundreds of spam mailing lists. Annoying, yes. Illegal, no. It gave her a small, satisfying sense of control. Then she moved on to his social life. She heard through the grapevine about a party he was hosting. A few anonymous calls to the Homeowners Association about noise violations before the party even started. Little things, paper cuts. Each one was a test, and each one that went unanswered emboldened her to go further. This is a classic behavioral pattern. The reinforcement she got wasn't from Tom's reaction because he often didn't even know it was her. The reinforcement was internal. It was the feeling of power, the temporary soothing of that deep, aching wound of being discarded. Then she took the campaign online. This is where things got really dangerous and frankly pathetic. She poured all the intelligence and meticulous planning that she once used to run their household into creating a web of lies. She created a fake social media profile, a fictional woman who supposedly had a one-night stand with Tom. She'd use this profile to comment on his new girlfriend's photos, planting seeds of doubt. Is he still telling you he has to work late? That's what he told me. It was insidious. It was designed to psychologically destabilize his new relationship. I read the messages and the craftsmanship was chilling. She knew all his vulnerabilities, all his little lies and habits, and she weaponized them with surgical precision. She was no longer just inflicting paper cuts, she was performing psychological warfare. And the entire time, she was documenting her successes in a private journal, not as a confession, but as a ledger of justice being served. But the line that for me can never be uncrossed is when you bring the children into the battlefield. They had 2 kids, a boy of 14 and a girl of 12. They were caught in a silent, toxic crossfire. Sarah never overtly told them to hate their father. She was too smart for that. Instead, she'd play the martyr. She'd sigh heavily when Tom's name was mentioned. She'd leave documents from the divorce highlighted with his unreasonable demands out on the kitchen counter. She would ask leading questions. Did your father seem happy with his new friend? Was she wearing the necklace he gave me for our anniversary? She was programming them. She was turning them into little spies in their own father's home, forcing them to carry a burden of loyalty and guilt that no child should ever have to bear. In her mind, she was just making sure they knew the truth. But what she was really doing was poisoning their well, contaminating their ability to love their father without feeling like they were betraying their mother. This wasn't about protecting her children, it was about recruiting them into her army. The breaking point for Tom, the thing that finally made him pick up the phone and call us, was when Sarah contacted his boss. She didn't use a fake name this time. She sent an email from an anonymous account, but filled it with details only a spouse would know. She fabricated a story about Tom having a gambling problem, about him misusing company funds for personal trips, all lies, but lies that were plausible enough to trigger a formal investigation at his firm. His career, the very thing she had sacrificed her own ambitions for, was now in her crosshairs. He was cleared, of course, but the damage was done. The trust with his colleagues was fractured. The humiliation was immense. It was no longer about their personal lives. She had attacked his ability to provide his very identity as a professional. That's when he knew this would never stop. He wasn't dealing with a grieving ex-wife anymore. He was dealing with an opponent who had decided that if she couldn't have the life they'd built, then he couldn't have any life at all. So now here they are, backstage in separate green rooms. Tom is a bundle of nerves, angry and exhausted, clutching his binder of evidence like a shield. Sarah, on the other hand, is calm, composed. She's reviewed her own set of notes. She's ready to present her case. She sees this as a trial, and she believes the jury of public opinion will be on her side once they hear what he did to her. She doesn't understand that I'm not a judge and this isn't a courtroom. I'm not here to rule on who was right or wrong in the marriage. That's in the past. I'm here to deal with the ugly, destructive, and dangerous now. I'm about to walk out there and sit across from a woman who has weaponized her pain and aimed it at everyone around her. My challenge isn't to break her down with accusations. That would just feed her sense of victimhood. My challenge is to hold up a mirror so clear, so undeniable, that she is forced to see the real victim of her crusade. And that's the stranger she's become. The moment the lights came up, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Tom was sitting on the edge of his seat, vibrating with a mixture of anger and anxiety. Sarah walked out with a chilling poise, her back straight, her chin up. She looked at him not with hatred, but with a kind of detached dismissal, as if he were a piece of evidence in her case that she was about to present. She sat down, crossed her legs, and looked at me, ready. The audience was silent. They could feel it. This wasn't going to be a shouting match. This was a cold war. Tom started, his voice cracking with emotion, launching into the list of grievances from his binder. She called my boss Dr. Phil. She told my girlfriend I have an STD. He was losing control, and that's exactly what she wanted. It made him look unstable while she looked like the calm, rational victim. I held up my hand. Tom, hold on. Son, I hear you. I've read everything in that binder and more. Let me talk to your ex-wife. He slumped back, frustrated but obedient. I turned to Sarah. I didn't lean in aggressively. I just looked at her. Sarah, I began, my voice even. I want to start by saying something you probably haven't heard enough of. What happened to you was profoundly wrong. To be betrayed after 15 years, to have the life you built dismantled by infidelity, that is a devastating, soul-crushing wound. I'm not here to minimize that pain, not for 1 second. I saw a flicker in her eyes. It was a crack in the armor. She gave a single sharp nod. That was the validation she had been starving for. That was my way in. But we're not here to talk about the divorce. I continued, my tone shifting slightly. We're here to talk about the last 2 years. We're here to talk about your response. Let's start with the fake social media profile. You called her Jessica. You gave her a whole backstory. You spent hours curating this fictional person's life, all with the goal of planting seeds of doubt in Tom's new relationship. Tell me when one of your posts would get a reaction when you saw that his girlfriend was rattled. What did that feel like for you? She didn't hesitate. It felt like he was finally getting a taste of his own medicine, she said, her voice like ice. He built his new life on a foundation of lies. I was just showing her the truth. He's a cheater. He lies. I was protecting another woman from going through what I went through. So you were protecting her? I asked, keeping my tone inquisitive. Because my team spoke with her. She said the experience was psychologically terrorizing. She was afraid to leave her house. She became paranoid and insecure. Is terrorizing a woman you don't know the same as protecting her? And let's be honest, Sarah, was this really about her, or was it about putting a win in your column? Was it about proving that you could still reach out and disrupt his happiness? She bristled at that. He didn't deserve to be happy. That may be, I said, but this isn't about what he deserves. This is about what you are doing. Let's move on to the children. We spoke with your son, Michael. He's 14. He's a great kid. He loves his mum very much. He told my producer something that I want you to hear. He said, "I feel like I have to be a spy. When I'm at Dad's, I can't talk about anything fun we did because I don't want to make Mum sad. And when I'm at Mum's, I feel bad for even missing Dad. Sarah, this isn't Tom's fault or your fault from the divorce. This is a direct result of the war you are waging. Is your justice worth the price of your son's peace?" For the first time, her composure cracked. A tear welled in her eye and she swiped it away with anger. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I would never hurt my children." "I know you wouldn't do it intentionally," I said, softening my voice just a little. "But you are. You're so focused on the enemy in front of you that you're not seeing the collateral damage all around you. Your children are collateral damage. Your own peace of mind is collateral damage. You've become a full-time general in a war of one." I let that sink in. The audience was completely still. Tom was watching her, his anger replaced by a look of profound sadness. He was seeing what I was seeing, a woman trapped in her own prison of pain. Then I decided it was time. Time to take away the one thing she was clinging to, the enemy. I leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, you've spent 2 years meticulously planning and executing this campaign. It's taken all your time, all your energy, all your focus. It has, in a way, become your new identity. For 15 years, you were Tom's wife. That was your job, your purpose. When he took that away, you found a new one. For the last 2 years, your purpose has been being Tom's enemy. My question for you is this." I paused, making sure I had her complete, undivided attention. "If you wake up tomorrow morning and you've won, he's lost his job, his girlfriend has left him, he's completely broken, and there's nothing left for you to fight, no more justice for you to deliver. Who is Sarah then?" That question hung in the air. It wasn't an accusation. It was a mirror. A stark, unflattering, and completely unavoidable mirror. Her entire fortress of justification was built on the premise of a righteous war against a clearly defined enemy. But I had just taken the enemy away, not by defending him, but by making him irrelevant to the real issue. The silence stretched. She opened her mouth to give me one of her well-rehearsed lines about justice or consequences, but the words died on her lips. Her eyes darted around the studio, not at Tom, not at the audience, but inward, as if searching for an answer she had never been forced to find. Who is Sarah then? The composure she had walked out with shattered. It wasn't a loud, dramatic breakdown, but something much more profound. It was a quiet implosion. Her shoulders slumped. The defiant set of her jaw softened. The icy clarity in her eyes clouded with a deep, bewildering confusion. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, then another. She wasn't crying for the husband she'd lost or the life that was gone. She was crying for the woman she didn't recognize in the mirror I was holding up. The woman whose only purpose had become tied to the man she claimed to despise. I don't know," she finally whispered, the words barely audible. And that was the most honest thing she had said in 2 years. It was the breakthrough. It was the moment the war ended, not with a victory or a defeat, but with the dawning realization that the only territory she had conquered was her own soul. The energy she had been pouring into destruction was the same energy she had failed to pour into reconstruction. I gave her a moment, letting the weight of that truth settle. This is the critical juncture. You can't just break someone down. You have to be there to help them understand what to do with the pieces. "And that's okay, Sarah," I said gently. "It's okay not to know, because for the first time in a very long time, that's a question about you. It's not about him. It's not about his girlfriend or his job. It's about Sarah, the woman who gave up a career path to raise a family, the woman who I'm told was a brilliant student, the woman who is a mother to 2 children who need her, not the general, not the victim, but their mum. They need her to be whole." I turned to Tom. "Tom," I said, "your anger is justified. Your frustration is real. But right now, this isn't about your binder of evidence. This is about the mother of your children. The war is over. The question is, can you two find a way to forge a diplomatic peace for the sake of those kids?" He looked at Sarah, and for the first time, he wasn't looking at his tormentor. He was looking at the woman he'd once loved, the mother of his children, and he saw the profound pain she was in. He gave a slow, somber nod. "I just want it to stop," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion. "For them. I just want it to stop." The rest of the show was about building a blueprint for that peace. We weren't talking about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was too soon for that. We were talking about pragmatics. We laid out a new communication plan, a co-parenting agreement that would be managed through a neutral third-party app so they wouldn't have to engage directly. We established firm boundaries. No more using the children as messengers, no more discussing the other parent's personal life with them. It was about de-escalation and creating a neutral zone where their children could feel safe. But the most important work was for Sarah. The promise I extracted from her right there on stage was that she would redirect all the energy she was spending on Tom and invest it in herself. I had a therapist lined up for her, a specialist in post-divorce identity and trauma. I gave her an assignment. I told her to go home and write a list. Not a list of Tom's wrongdoings, but a list of who Sarah was before she was Tom's wife. What did she love? What were her passions? What did she dream about when she was 18 years old, before her entire world became intertwined with someone else's? I told her that her new full-time job was the rediscovery of Sarah. It was a quiet, somber end to the show. There was no big hug, no tearful apology. It wasn't a neat, tidy resolution wrapped up in a bow. It couldn't be. The damage was too deep. The healing would be a long, arduous process. As they walked off stage separately, there was a palpable sense of emptiness. The fire that had fueled Sarah for 2 years had been extinguished, and what was left was a cold, unfamiliar landscape she now had to navigate alone. My job was done on the stage, but I knew, as I often do, that the real work for her was just beginning. Would she follow through? Would she do the hard work of rebuilding herself from the ground up? Or would the familiar pull of victimhood and blame be too strong to resist? That was the question that would determine the rest of her life. In the weeks and months that followed, we kept in close contact with both Sarah and Tom. That's a part of the process the cameras don't see. The follow-up is everything. You don't just expose a wound that deep, put a band-aid on it and send people on their way. Healing is an active process, and it's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Initially, Sarah struggled mightily. The silence was deafening. For 2 years, her mind had been a bustling war room, constantly strategizing, planning her next move, replaying past injustices. Now that room was empty. The adrenaline that had coursed through her veins was gone, replaced by a profound and terrifying exhaustion. She told her therapist, who relayed it to my team, that the first week was the hardest. She'd instinctively reach for her phone to check Tom's social media or drive past his office just to see. The habit of her obsession was deeply ingrained. It was an addiction, and she was experiencing withdrawal. There was one particularly bad moment about a month in. Tom, following the new co-parenting plan, sent a brief, impersonal email through the app about their son's upcoming soccer tournament. It was exactly what we had agreed upon, civil to the point, focused only on the child. But for Sarah, it was a trigger. The coldness of the email felt like a fresh rejection. The old narrative started creeping back in. "Look at him, he's moved on. He doesn't care, he gets to be happy while I'm miserable." She admitted she spent an entire afternoon composing a scathing multi-page response, dredging up every past sin. But then she stopped. She looked at the draft, and for the first time, she saw it not as a righteous takedown, but as a desperate plea for engagement. Even negative attention was attention. She was trying to pull him back onto the battlefield, because the battlefield was the only place she knew how to exist with him anymore. And in that moment, looking at that unsent email, she made a choice. She deleted it. Word by word. It was a small victory, but it was perhaps the most important one of her life. That was the turning point. She started to do the work. She made that list I asked her to make. It started slowly. I liked to read. I was good at painting. I wanted to travel to Italy. Simple things, ghosts of a former self. Her therapist encouraged her to pick one and act on it. She signed up for a beginner's art class at a local community college. She was terrified. It had been 20 years. She was surrounded by people half her age. But she went, and she painted, and she told us it was the first time in years she had gone a full 2 hours without thinking about Tom once. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to lay a new foundation, one that was hers alone. She started reconnecting with old friends, the ones she had let drift away because they didn't fit into the perfect couple image she had curated. She took a weekend trip to the coast by herself. She read books that had nothing to do with self-help or divorce. These weren't grand, dramatic gestures. They were small, quiet acts of self-reclamation. Each one was a brick in the new structure of her identity. Meanwhile, the dynamic with her children began to transform. As she focused less on Tom's life, she became more present in theirs. The toxic tension in their home began to dissipate. She could listen to a story about their weekend with their dad without her expression tightening. She stopped asking probing questions. One day her daughter came home from school and hugged her, saying, "It's nice to have you back, Mum." Sarah broke down. She realized then that in her quest for revenge, she had been just as absent as the husband who had left. This isn't to say it was a perfect linear journey. There were still bad days. Days filled with bitterness and regret. The grief for her lost life was still there, a dull ache that would sometimes flare up. The difference was that she now had other things to fill the space. Her life was no longer defined by a single gaping hole. It was becoming a mosaic of new experiences, new connections, and rediscovered parts of herself. The whole was still there, but it was no longer the entire picture. It was just one piece among many. The last update I got was about 6 months after the show. She had enrolled in a paralegal certification program. It was something she had considered before she got married. She was at the top of her class. She was still in therapy. She and Tom were co-parenting effectively, if not warmly. The restraining order was dropped. The war was for all intents and purposes truly over. She sent me a short email. It didn't say much. It just said, "Thank you for asking me that question. I'm finally starting to find the answer." And in the end, that's all you can hope for. You can't erase the past. You can't undo the pain. But you can decide that your future will not be a prisoner of your history. Sarah had been living in a story where she was the victim seeking revenge. She was finally learning how to write a new one, a story where she was simply the hero, her own hero.